Glad to be here today, share some of our learnings. I can tell you overall, it wasn't an easy decision. It was probably one of the toughest decisions we've had in a while at that point. Many of our senior leaders did not want to entertain the idea of self-checkout machines in any Longo store. I think at some point when I was presenting the idea, I thought I was going to get thrown out of the meeting. There was tough comments from our senior leaders. We are known for service. We're not going to allow our guests to scan and bag their own groceries. This is not who we are. And those are all comments many years ago when we introduced the self checkouts. And these were all fair comments. And we knew this was a huge change for our business. So we had to make sure that we were making the right decision at that point. We knew it was going to be an uphill battle to convince the business to do the right thing. So off we went. We did an internal survey with our guest panel. Longo's has an internal panel that we asked the question to if they would be interested in having self checkouts in the stores. We did the same thing with our true rating pin pads, asking the guests a specific question around the uses of self checkouts and if they were interested. So sure enough, the guest appetite was there, and no surprise to me, but surprise to others in the business. And at that point, no one can disagree with the guest feedback. So we quickly started our journey with our first store.
We're going to hear more from Bill and his reaction to our 2024 data in just a few minutes. But right now, I'm going to hand things over to Gareth, who's just going to show some of our 2024 data and whether consumers agree or disagree with some of those negative headlines we've seen. So over to you, Gareth.
Thanks, Dina. So hello, everyone. I'm Gareth Johns. I'm Head of Data and Insight at True Rating. And I'm just going to take you through, I guess, some of the results that we've seen from questions that we've asked customers specifically around self-checkout that we asked earlier this year, but also that we asked the same period in 2023, just to see how perceptions have changed through that time as well. So if we look at the first myth, I guess, is self-checkout dead and buried? Is it something that was trialed and that customers don't want and it's going away? I think if we look at the preferences that customers show for their method for self-checkout, you can see that it is true that customers seem to be less excited by self-checkout than maybe they were last year, but to say that it's kind of dead and buried is far from the truth. So even in convenience retail, which I guess is the biggest area where self-checkout is important, you have 70% of customers still preferring self-checkout to cashier checkout. And even in places like grocery, where obviously Bill's based, or apparel, you've still got a very healthy percentage of customers that prefer to make use of checkout. So it is far from something that customers want to see leave the store. And I guess the second myth, which is a bit related to the first one, this idea that kind of everybody hates it, and the only reason we use it is because we're forced to. This question was asked of everybody at store, whether or not they were actually using self-checkout or not using self-checkout. And I think the interesting thing here was that even when you're looking at customers who were choosing to go to a cashier and were in a store which had a heavy percentage of customers that preferred cashier checkout for themselves, actually they were still pretty happy with the idea that the store had self-checkout. So I guess if you're thinking of that from a customer point of view, even if I don't want to use self-checkout, the fact that it exists in the store means that other people can go use it, means that the lines can go through quicker, and actually it makes for a better experience for me, even if I myself don't want to use it for whatever reason. So I think the idea of taking self-checkout out, you've got to think it's not just the people that use self-checkout that will be impacted, it's all the other customers who are still using cashier checkout. And then I think the third myth, this idea that people only use it when they're forced to. What we've actually seen is that whether or not you're using self-checkout or cashier checkout, there's a real sort of healthy group of customers that I guess the kind of diehards that will always choose that method. So, of the people that are using self-checkout, 2/3 of them will always use that option if it's available. And then for that other third of people that are using self-checkout, they sort of split evenly into two groups. You've got the people that are kind of almost standing there making an educated kind of bet of what's my quickest way to get through payment and get out of this store, and I'll pick man's checkout or self-checkout based on where I think I'm going to get out quicker. And then really you've only got kind of 17-18% of customers that are feeling that they are forced to use it, that it's the only option that they have available. So I think this was a big learning from the webinar we did about maybe 18 months ago, which is the most important thing you can do for customers if you're putting self-checkout in is make sure that it is a choice that they can make, not one that you're making for them. So as long as it is an option rather than the only option, I think customers are pretty excited about self-checkout and will continue to make good use of it.
In our Maple Leaf Square location, this is right in the heart of downtown Toronto. This store had high customer count, lower baskets, and penetrated very heavily on prepared meals, which equates to the reason for the smaller basket. The store is surrounded by office towers, sports arena, and attracts a lot of tourists. So we thought this would be the ideal store to test it. At that point, the store was very busy with customer count, and I would say the lineups during peak time, especially around lunch or dinner hour, got very long. So we're looking for a different solution, a different option for our guests to pay, but also an efficient way as well to check out. Back to Garrett's point on providing choice, that was for us is critical to delivering a guest experience promise. It's not about, and that's something we use, that language we use every day with our teams. We don't force a guest to do anything. We give them the choice, whether they want to use a self-checkout or they want a full service register with a cashier. It's all about having the right balance in your approach. The option's always there for guests, and that's no matter what time of day. So whether you're shopping first thing in the morning or late in the evening, the choice for the guest to use a self-checkout or not will always be there. So the critical word is do not force the guest to do something they don't want to. Surprising for me, for sure. I'm surprised that the data only shows 20% would prefer self-checkout in a grocery store. When we did our internal surveys years ago, the numbers were closer to the 45%, and it ranged. Some stores were a bit less, some stores a bit more, but it was I would say closer to the half, the 50%. And that was the reason we made that decision to move forward and use that data to make decisions in implementing the self-checkouts across the business. We now fast forward, we have 95% of our stores with self-checkouts, including every new store that we open. We're opening a new store in October of this year, and it's part of the plans. But blown away with certain markets that are currently today penetrating north of 50% of our transactions on self-checkouts. And again, that's by choice.
When self-checkout first came out, that was fairly straightforward to do because stores didn't put they put some self-checkout in, but they didn't expect it to take all the transactions. So they would still have the cashier checkout. And it was very clear to a customer where the self-checkout line was or tills were and where the cashier tills were. I think over the last couple of years, we've seen technology move forward into more of these kind of hybrid tills that can flip one way or the other. And it becomes much easier for a store to kind of alter their estate almost of how many tills are they going to have set up with cashiers, how many tills are they going to have set up for customers to use themselves, how many members of staff are they going to appoint as a sort of a self-checkout host, and is the self-checkout host there to help when there's a problem, or are they actually there to assist every single customer through? And I think some of these developments have led to more of the decisions about the way that you check out being almost at the decision made by the store manager rather than the decision made by the customer. So I really like Bill's point about you've got to give the guest both those options, and you've got to make it clear to the guest that those options exist, not that you're kind of dictating where they go and how they check out.
Market continues to be competitive. We're, in our market, more and more competitors opening up, and we're not a discounter, and we want to stay proud to who we are and that's providing our guests with remarkable service. And that's a must in the business. It's always been a must, but today more than ever, this competitive landscape. And that's why guests choose to shop with us. They tell us all the time, they shop with Longo's because of our service, because of our team, our knowledgeable team. So for us, we continue to invest in our team members on training. We continue to invest on our new team members that come on board as well. We're investing more and more every year, seeing the importance to service our stores across the network. Our team members are amazing. I would say that's who delivers our promise. And for us, being voted again #1 grocery store in Ontario for overall experience in the WOW report is something that we're very proud of, and our team is proud of as well. I would say the technology needs to be up to date and tailor that for your own business. That's critical. We saw when we first looked at the units, and we wanted to put the Longo's way on them as well. So technology, again, needs to stay up to date. It needs to be tailored to each business. For example, we took the approach when we put our first self-checkout units at our Maple Leaf Square store. The home screens always had the top selling items on there, and at that store, the hot bar, the salad bar, bottled water, bananas, those are all key items that we sold a lot in that store. And it's important that they're on the home screen because it saves the consumer, the guest, some time as they're cashing out. And I would say my team was heavily involved in the implementation from the beginning, and it continues. It doesn't stop. Years ago when we implemented, they still have relationships with the vendor, providing even up to today the guest feedback on some of the things they want to see. So they work closely with the vendor. And again, I just want to say it's a journey. It's not a one and done with these units.
Yeah, understood. And Gareth, I just want to direct that same question to you as well. Have you got any additional thoughts?
I'd say one thing that we do see some in our data is we've asked a couple of different questions, I guess just around the checkout experience. And one was, how easy was it to check out? And the other being, were you happy with your queue time or your wait time to check out? And actually, when we think about self-checkout, I think quite often we become quite narrowly focused on from the second you actually get to that terminal and you start your scanning and packing and weighing and all that sort of stuff until the point you leave. But I think from a consumer point of view, actually the checkout experience begins the minute they decide that they've got everything they need and they're ready to pay. And so actually ease of checkout is much more driven by wait time than it is by almost technology at the till. And the differences that we see in self-checkout or just checkout in general's kind of experience is so much heavily driven by wait time. So I guess from a self-checkout point of view, if you're moving to self-checkout and that gives you the opportunity to open more tills than you would otherwise use, and it gives you the ability to really focus on that throughput, that's often the thing that customers seem to be most interested in. So
absolutely, we have some stores in different markets as well that have higher basket, higher penetration, which I talked about earlier, of percentage of sales, percentage of transaction. And I would say these higher volume stores have implemented a second team member to support peak hours. So for example, a store has high penetration during Friday, Saturday, Sunday business between 12 and 5. On that schedule, we've implemented with a handful of stores that they have a second team member there to support the guest, provide a better guest experience, and it just speeds up the flow of traffic as well. Again, this is just another example how the team always is looking for ways to improve our service, elevate our service, and keeping our guests top of mind. It's definitely a hot topic, and I would say if we step back and say shrink is coming from different ways in our business. We see it with full buggies trying to walk out of our store, to reusable bags being an issue with shoplifting as well. But I would say self-checkouts, is there something there? I would say yes, like everyone else, but it's not the only thing that's driving shrink across the stores. And I think it comes down to having the right team member at the self-checkout, not just putting any team member there. I would say putting the right team member who is well-trained, who is great at service, because you need that individual there. Because our mindset should be first and foremost on service versus theft. And that's our approach. And it's important to have the right measures and technology in place. There's lots of technology out there to detect theft and support the self checkout. But that, again, that only works if you're executing that, and that comes down to the right team member.